I know you write about 500,000 words a year on average. Is that right?
Yeah, I was a little off this year. I had some personal life things that interfered with my usual productive uh, output. I'm vowing or hoping, I guess, that 2019 will allow me to get back to that standard productivity because I'm happier when I'm writing, and not so happy when I have to go take care of my mom in the hospital and stuff like that. So, but I'm hoping that life will allow me to be productive again. But yes, I'm a very productive writer, and it's because that's where my happy place is, and I worked really hard to get to that productivity level where my creative process, I like hacked my creative process in order to unleash at whatever is best for me. Everybody has to work in their own process, right? So whatever works for your process, do that. You don't have to follow me. You don't have to hit a certain production rate to whatever be successful. Everybody works a different way, and even I work a very different way on different books. Some books just require a lot more work than other books do, and it may not be because they're better books, or sometimes it's because they're more complicated books, but oftentimes it's more about me. It's like, okay, now this is a thriller, which I've never written a thriller before. So now I need to go off and do more, craft work of really understanding thriller structure and watch a bunch of movies that are thrillers and study a bunch of books. And, like there's a whole learning curve thing there that I wouldn't have to do if I was just writing another paranormal romance, which I've written, a dozens of them before. So, um, you have to, and it depends. If this is like you haven't written more than a couple of books, you're still learning how to write a book. Like that's going to take time, and don't sweat that. You need to just do what you can do for you. So I totally
How
derailed
boring
you
would
on
it
that.
be if
Sorry.
you got to a stage where everything was pre-planned? You knew exactly what you were going to do from the start on every book. There was never anything new. At that point, you might as well just go make widgets on an assembly line, right?
I suppose that's the whole idea of staying fresh, right? This is why I'm writing romantic thrillers, which I have never written before. That's why I'm doing tech thrillers next, because it's new. Whatever you have to do to stay fresh. Some people can stay fresh while staying in the same genre and writing the same kind of book, and they have a way of doing that that works for them. And and then some people don't. I mean, I think we all know of authors that we loved, and then like at some point you're just phoning it in, man. you're just writing the same book that you wrote 100 times before. Why are you doing that? Don't do that. So
Once in a while, an author will slip into that and then come back and win me back again, which I'm always excited to see. And then I figure it was worth it, whatever they had to work out. If
right.
I have to put up with a couple of Tommy knockers to get to the stand, to get to needful things, that's fine. Go ahead and write that terrible book. It's a one-off. It's you've earned
Right,
it.
sure. Absolutely.
So what does your typical writing day look like, and how long does it take you on average to complete a book?
Well, again, totally depends on the book. My last Mind Jack book that I wrote, because I came back 5 years after the first trilogy and wrote a second trilogy. And so the sixth book in that series was so intense emotionally for me to write that damn book. I was so resistant to writing that book that it took me probably 5 months to work through writing that book. And it wasn't like because I couldn't get the words on the page. It was just like I was mentally having a hard time with it. And it just exacted a lot from me. Um, and then when I was done with that, I sat down and wrote a trilogy of romances, and I wrote 3 books of 50,000 words, 50 to 60,000 words a piece in 2 months. So it was just like bang, 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 because I knew what I wanted to do and I was energized, and it was like new material and it didn't have this emotional drain thing going on where I had like this internal conflict I was fighting. I was just free to go. And this is where I was writing, you know, the physicist and, it wasn't like they were not complex books. It wasn't like they were not, emotional books. They were just a different kind of emotional thing that I wasn't resisting. So then when I go to this like next thriller that I was writing, that took me, I expected it to take a month to write, and it took 4 months to write. And that was completely because it had nothing to do with the book or me as a writer. It was completely because my life got insane with, life stuff that was unavoidable. And so it just took longer to do because I didn't have as much time to write. Typically, I write during the day when my kids are at school, and that gives me a good 6 hours a day to write. But, not always. And
It's 6 hours a day, and then you put it aside because the kids are home and it's family time, or do you come back to it after that?
Generally, I put it aside because I really want to be present with the people who are important in my life. And so that's important to me. And not only that, my brain needs a rest. My brain needs to not be constantly churning the creative stuff because I will exhaust my brain. And if I want to come back the next day and be fresh and be able, this is part of hacking your creative process, is knowing when to turn it off and then being able to turn it back on and off. That switch is, knowing your own switch is really key to, I think, getting to the place where you're doing your best work. And that's where I always want to be. I want to be doing my best work when I sit down and work on stuff. So
Are we talking 6 hours straight, or do you have structured breaks, or just breaks as they become necessary?
oh, I break all the time. In fact, if I'm sitting for more than 45 minutes, I set a timer and I force myself to get up and move because it's just bad for my body to sit for that long, right? So I get up and I move and I have a mental break. I very forcefully try to, I'll leave myself a little note. And I know I'm getting to the end of my 45 minutes, or sometimes I'll let it go a little longer. And if I'm in a really good spot and I'm in the flow of it, but then I'll stop and I'll leave myself a little note that says, okay, these are the things that are going to happen next. Now go take a break. And it works beautifully because the time that I'm off not thinking about the book, it loosens up my mind to make connections that I wouldn't have made before, so that when I come back and sit down again, boom, I am ready to go. And the stuff is just flowing out again. So
You're
yeah.
doing maybe a 45-minute sprint, just you're sitting down, you're not checking your internet, you're focused 100%,
Yes.
churning out words.
Yes.
And then how long does it break? 5-10 minutes where you move around and get some coffee or whatever it is you're doing on your break?
I try to do like 45, 15. And during my 15 minutes, I do not check the internet. I do not check Facebook. I go sweep the kitchen or get some tea or, just move around and do stuff mentally different. So I'll do that 45, 15 routine for a few hours, and then I'll take a lunch break for an hour. And, then I might look at the internet, or I might, do something and make myself a lunch. And then I come back for another few hours of, doing that. So I probably don't even get a full 6 hours of actual focused writing time in. I like to. If on a good day, I will have that for sure, but it doesn't always work out that way. Life is what it is. And I don't.
It's working out just fine.
Yeah, it is actually, for the most part. The things that I can't control, I can't control. And, that life isn't always, I don't want people to think, oh, Sue's life is always perfect and wonderful and amazing. I mean, I have struggles just like everybody has struggles. And, I think it's important to keep creating even when you have struggles, and then to be kind to yourself when you can't hit whatever your goals are. Be kind and say, hey, you know what, you're trying. You'll be back and trying again more when you can. So that's my philosophy, at least.
Makes sense to me. If only I could apply it to myself as well and be more forgiving. But I got to say, I've been evaluating a lot of authors. That's always been one of my main motivations for running the blog and now doing this podcast video show thing. Is I chat with authors, lots of different authors, and then it's like I always think it was like tagging a bee and then letting them go back to the hive and checking in with them later. So if I've had you at the blog 2 years, 3 years from now, I remember what you said in your interview. Let me go see how that panned out for you. And sometimes, oh yeah, you said really smart things in the interview that made sense to me. And now look at you 3-4 years later, that has panned out. And other authors I see differently. And we were talking about Fairy Swap, and even though that sounds like didn't have quite the success that you had envisioned for it, you still went at it. I mean, you had a card game that you developed just for the book that kids could play, as opposed to authors I've seen that have publishing contracts that a lot of writers would kill for. They've got the world's biggest publisher. They've got Scholastic. They've got Random Penguin behind them. They've got all the libraries in check. Everything's panning out for them. And what are they doing? Watching Netflix all day. And it doesn't make sense to me. So there has to be something, because you are far more successful than people I talked to at the same time when I first started talking to you. So there has to be something to that work ethic. Now, when we're talking 6 hours, is that just Monday through Friday and then weekends with the fam, or is that every day?
That varies too. Like when early on in my career, I worked a lot harder. I worked more like 10, 12 hours a day on either marketing or writing. Because I was obsessed. Okay, I was a workaholic and I was obsessed and I loved to write. And the business was exciting because it was new and, so I spent a lot of really hard time. And I would say the first 2 years, all I did was learn how to write. And I was just like stealing minutes whenever I could to learn how to write and to write my books. And then the first few years after that, it was the business part and it was every minute of every day. And I burned out on that pretty bad. I never stopped writing and I never stopped publishing, but emotionally I was really on the edge because I was just so tired. And I'm like, okay. And my health was like not doing great because of it, because I wasn't getting up and moving like I should and stuff like that. So a few years ago, I had to have like a reckoning of like, if I really want to do this for the long term, I have got to have more balance in my life. I have to, and I didn't want to slow down, okay, because I'm too ambitious for that. So I had to scale up my efficiency. And that was part of why I started hacking my process. I'm like, how can I get more writing done more effectively in the same amount of time so that I can have that balance, so I can go and have time with my family and, not have this 24/7 stress thing going on. So I feel like I've done actually a pretty good job of that in the last year. And so now my life looks like I do that writing when my kids are at school. I take time off when like my college-age son comes home for a week. Well, you know what? I'm going to take off extra time and I'm going to spend it with him. And that's really okay. And the books will get written when they get written. At the same time, here I am like in 2019, I'm like, I really want to get some books written. I really want to like crank some of those out again because I've spent the time I had to with some family issues. Like my mom was in the hospital and my mother-in-law passed away and was in hospice for a long time. So there's a lot of family demands that were like really important to pay attention to at that time. But those are we're kind of getting past those now. And I'm like, okay, it's time for me to get back to be able to be the productive person I know how to be. And it really, diving deep into that again. But at the same time, I want to keep my, exercise and eating routines, that are my meditation. I'm very into meditation and all the healthy things that I know how to do. And at the same time, also, I've got kids that are heading off to college. I want to spend time with them and make sure, we really have that connection before they go off into the world. And so,
well, nobody wants to hit all their writing goals, win all the awards, get all the money, and then get to the end and your health is terribly deteriorated. Right. And you're looking around like, all right, who do I tell about all this exciting stuff I did? Oh, I'm alone. I got everyone left me.
You got to have a life, we really do. And I think as writers, it's a huge danger for us because we are so interior, right? We're in our heads with our stories and it's a beautiful place and we love it, but we need to get out too and not forget that connection because it fuels the inside as well. And, I want to live to be 100 because I have that many more books to write. It's like I'm in this for the long haul. So I got to go do my meditation so I'm like not so stressed so I can actually be productive and write the books that are calling to me. So I hope that people will do that. I know indie publishing is so intense and the the drive to publish is so intense, and it's monetarily rewarded, which just makes it worse. Okay, because now it's like, well, yeah, sure, if I actually kill myself writing these books super fast, the market will reward me for that financially, right? How do you say no to that? Well, it's really easy. You say no. I'm not going to do that.
Without getting crass, because you did go through that 12-hour a day workaholic phase, and you have been rewarded financially for it. Have you gotten to a point where the finance is no longer the primary concern, and you can relax a little bit? Is that going hand in hand with this need to back off a little bit?
No, because I'm fortunate that my husband has a great job and good insurance, and I never had to actually make money. So the money that I have made has gone towards funding my kids, college, which is fantastic. And we would have been financially a lot more strapped if I hadn't done that, right? The money actually has always been somewhat optional for me, which is not the case for a lot of people, right? I mean, like, oh my God, and I would say it's not the case for almost everyone in reality. Most people in reality can have a job that pays the bills and they can write part-time. Writing part-time is very viable, and it's, you're not going to do it fast, but you will, you can do it. You can still do it, and you can still publish, and you can still have a career, like a side career doing that. So it's not like you have to have writing pay the bills in order to write. Writing can be freed from having to pay the bills. But most people don't want that. They want writing to pay the bills. They want writing to be, and partly because they want to write full time, which I totally understand. I would have had a really hard time if I couldn't have spent all that time, so spending that time came from not from a need to pay the bills. It came from just this extreme passion that I had. I've always been a workaholic, but it has never been about paying the bills. It's always been because I love my work so much that I just want to do it all the time. And it's a little obsessive. It's not necessarily a good thing. Okay. It pays off because it helps having that grit and that, work ethic. But it has some downsides too that I'm learning to compensate for, so I'm just more of a healthy person.